Do you have a dream or a vision or a spiritual revelation that's just bugging you to no end? We're going to be talking about that today. You're having coffee with Conrad on
Conrad Rocks!
Welcome to yet another edition of Coffee with Conrad. This is Conrad from ConradRocks.net. Rocks of Revelation being poured out to you. You know that my passion is for you, yes, you, to have a spiritual relationship with the biblical Jesus. Today, we're going to be talking about another aspect of spiritual Christianity. When God gives us something in the Spirit, we have to get back into the Spirit for it to resolve. Think of a time where you know you were in the Spirit and at the end you were left with a question you didn't really understand. You may call up your friends for an interpretation or some help, but you also might run into a dead end that lasts sometimes for decades. I have been there, buddy. But one thing is, we don't want to ignore this and just shrug our shoulders. We want to seek God in the Spirit. That's what we're talking about today.
We are having coffee with Conrad at ConradRocks.net. Jesus rules!
So spiritual visions or revelations often cause dissonance within ourselves. There's this internal conflict. Now, when we're seeking God in the Spirit, and you know God's a spirit, Bible says we must seek Him and worship Him in spirit and in truth, there comes a time where there's going to be this contrast, this dissonance between the Spirit and what we know in our conscious mind. It's going to, we're going to be stumped. And this is, we don't understand these spiritual things. The carnal mind, the conscious mind doesn't really understand or comprehend spiritual things. This, though, we have this tendency to try to figure something spiritual out. And it bugs us. It sticks with us until we finally get it. And the Spirit will give us a dream or a vision, and it will be cryptic. It'll be sealed, encoded. We'll talk about that in a minute. We will be seeking an interpretation because there's this uneasy feeling that we need resolved. We need to finally know what it means. Have you ever noticed in the Bible, God would send someone dreams, and it would bother them to no end until they found out what the interpretation was? This is being taught or led by the Spirit of truth, which guides us into all truth in the New Testament perspective. If it began in the Spirit, we must get back to the Spirit. Now, if God's given you something in the Spirit, right, it's a spiritual thing, it often requires, and mostly requires, or I think of always is going to require, us to get back into the Spirit to catch that revelation. Maybe tossing it over with a mentor. We can't just go about our business and be concerned with the affairs of this life. We need to seek God diligently, Hebrews 11:6. And an example is Daniel was troubled with that vision that he had, remember? And he fasted 21 days, and he finally got the interpretation. You can read about that in Daniel chapter 10. How do we get back into the Spirit? It's like going back to your favorite fishing hole. You just kind of remember it. Once you find it, you're like, wow, this is awesome. You just kind of remember how to get back there. Or it's like tuning into your favorite radio station. You know where it is on the dial. And when you're listening to radio stations and one's heavy metal and one's sports news or whatever, you know the God station. Psalm 100.4, that's my favorite radio station. We enter into His gates with thanksgiving and His courts with praise. Be thankful unto Him and bless His name. That's one way or prescription of getting into the Spirit. Amen? Now, I believe that the reason God set it up this way is so that we would spend time seeking Him. He wants to spend time with His children. It's the question that drives us. If you remember the movie The Matrix, it's the question that drives us. Without the question, our lives would be boring. We've got to have purpose. And I think a question drives me. I just have to know the answer. What does the question drive us to? God. He's the one with all the answers. And God is a spirit, and we must seek Him where? In the Spirit and in truth. Amen? Now, I want you to think about this. This is pre-cross, and this is with heathens. Do you remember that God gave Pharaoh, a heathen, he wasn't a Jew, right? And Nebuchadnezzar dreams. Think of the dream with Pharaoh. Think of the dream with Nebuchadnezzar. They were giving something spiritual in their dreams, and they could not figure it out. It was bothering them. It was frustrating them to no end. Then It took who? A prophet of God. And what do prophets of God have access to? The Spirit of God. And what did they do? They unlocked that prophetic sealed revelation. Both of those dreams were sealed. They were encoded. This is like the 7 seals in the book of Revelation. Only a spiritual powerhouse in the kingdom can unlock those 7 seals, and we know that to be Jesus Christ. Now, the heathens, they don't have Jehovah God on their mind all day, every day. So God has to get his message to them through dreams and a vision of the night. Now, there's this passage in Job that's spoken by Elihu, and I refer to this often because he talks about a sealed dream or a sealed vision. In Job 33, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, in slumberings upon the bed, then he openeth the ears of men and sealeth their instruction, that he may withdraw man from his purpose and hide pride from man. He keepeth back his soul from the pit and his life from perishing by the sword. Job, which is the oldest book in the Bible, talks about this ancient precept of sealing their instructions, sealing the dream, sealing the vision. Now, like in Job chapter 33 previously there, the Bible talks about sealing the vision in Daniel chapter 12, or seals in the book of Revelation. This means to encode. Now, if we look at the word seal in Revelation chapter 5, and I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written, within and on the backside sealed with 7 seals, you'll notice that the book is in the lap of the Father, right? And the word seal here is the Greek 4973. I can't pronounce it, but it means like a signet, a fencing in or protection from misappropriation. You get that? A fencing in or protecting from misappropriation. By implication, the stamp impressed as a mark of privacy or genuineness, literally or figuratively. So see how God seals up these spiritual things? We know that spiritual things can only be spiritually discerned by those in the Spirit, right? That verse in 1 Corinthians 2:14 and 15, but the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for their foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they're spiritually discerned. But he that is spiritual judgeth all things, yet he himself is judged of no man.
Hi, this is Jennifer Cotney with Christian Mix 106, and I'm having coffee with Conrad on ConradRocks.net.
Now, I'm going to say something pretty elementary here, but I guess it needs to be said. If we have a spiritual relationship with the biblical Jesus, we're going to have spiritual experiences, dreams and visions, like is guaranteed in Acts chapter 2. And we're going to need to get back to that spirit of where that original revelation came from in order to unlock the problem. That's been my experience. The spirit of prophecy is different than it was in the Old Testament. It's not just a prophet of God that can know these things. You know, Jesus says something in John chapter 14. He says he will manifest himself to those that love him. In John 14:21, he that hath my commandments and keepeth them, he it is that loveth me, and he that loveth me shall be loved of my Father, and I will love him and will manifest myself to him. And later on, he talks about him and the Father making their abode with us. These are spiritual things. God is a spirit. So let me drive that home to you. Spiritual people with a spiritual relationship with Jesus are going to have spiritual experiences. It's not just about reading text. It's about knowing intimately the author and finisher of our faith, which is Jesus Christ. I was asking God one time in prayer about dream interpretation, and he showed me that it's like hearing the clicking sound of a tumbler when you're trying to crack open a safe. A safe is definitely something that is sealed. And you know the safe is open before the door's open because you hear the tumblers drop. There's this feeling of satisfaction. You just know that it's going to open. It's the same thing with Revelation. There's a click in your spirit and you just know. There's this definite verification in your spirit, and it bears out later in life. When this cryptic revelation or this cryptic vision is finally unsealed, your spirit will leap Like John the Baptist leaped in his mother's womb when he knew Jesus was nearby. It's going to be awesome like that. It's like two tuning forks. I'm always referring to this. A tuning fork will be in one side of the room and it will vibrate. And if it's in the same frequency as another tuning fork on the opposite side of the room, it's going to vibrate too. It resonates in the spirit. That's how you know that Pharaoh was so sure of that dream interpretation that he set Joseph up to be second in all of Egypt. That's how Nebuchadnezzar was so sure that he exalted Daniel to prominence as well. They just knew. Now keep in mind, God rewards the diligent seekers. If you read Hebrews 11:6, but without faith, it's impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God, remember God was sitting on the throne, the Father with those 7 seals, right? For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Now, I talked about how Daniel fasted for 21 days, and he finally got the interpretation from God. And this reminds me of times when I was talking to the Lord as a kid, and I refer to this quite often, but some of the stuff, and I remember some of the conversations, I was very young, and I've been watching that unfold for decades. You know, sometimes we'll have a dream, and it may take us quite some time for it to unfold, just like in Daniel. You know, the books of Daniel, the 70 weeks in Daniel chapter 9, those people weren't really supposed to get that until the Messiah came. It says in Daniel 12 that the book's going to be sealed. And in Daniel 9, it talks about there's going to be 70 weeks, and it starts, the prophetic clock starts with Nehemiah's wall, which comes later, and it's a countdown, and they start understanding it when these events start coming to pass. That's how Jesus warns us about when you start seeing these things come to pass, the stuff that's in the Bible there, it's going to like, you're going to go, oh, that's what he means. The point I'm trying to get across here is it's got to be in God's timing as well. We can't understand something before he wants us to understand it. Like you can fast all you want, but that book's not supposed to be unsealed for a certain time. And that's just the way it works, man. Now, I'm going to tell you about a dream I had, and this is really frustrating. This is a dream I had a couple of decades ago. And I write down my dreams. I keep a dream journal. You know, I basically just keep a journal, and I use the hashtag dream or dream and visions. And I go through them so I can differentiate the difference between what I would consider a prophetic dream, a spiritual revelation, or just bad pizza. Now, in this dream that I had that keeps coming to my remembrance, I was across one of those banquet tables from the devil. And we had these building blocks. They look like dominoes. There were some, if I remember correctly, they were dominoes. And I would build a wall up of these blocks. And I would keep thinking about precept upon precept, precept upon precept, you know, Isaiah 28:10 and 11. And as I was building upon these precepts, it was actually a defense against the devil. And I noticed that he was strategically putting blocks to see if they could be higher in certain areas than mine. So as I was going about this, I noticed that I had more shored up defenses in many areas than he had, possible ways to get in. But there were some areas that I was weak on. And these are the ones where the devil comes in and looks for an opportune time to come in and mess with me or you. You know, I think this might be for all believers, and I keep thinking about, you know, there's this teaching that we're supposed to be victorious in each and every area of our life. And I do believe that we're constantly and continually overcoming. But the frustration from this dream over a couple of decades, I started seeing something that Paul said in 2 Corinthians 12:7. And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of revelations. Now keep remembering how the dream was sealed to keep pride from in and keep him from falling into the pit, right? Unless I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. Now here's Paul the Apostle. What does he say? For this thing I besought the Lord thrice. That's 3 times that it might depart from me. And God says to him, right? My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. So this cooks my noodle. I mean, here's Paul, the apostle, and he's got a thorn in the flesh. It's a messenger of Satan. Now, I've noticed where there's some areas where I beat the devil in certain areas. Like I talk about panic attacks. I talk about depression. I've won those things. I've got bigger dominoes than he does, and there are some that I haven't won yet. I'm still working on. And I realized that, just how Jesus healed people in different ways. He might spit mud in their eyes, or he might just say, reach forth your hand. Jesus says he does what he sees the Father do. And that means before Jesus, put mud in that man's eye, the Father showed him in the Spirit. Because God's a spirit, we must worship him in spirit and truth. So God showed him in the Spirit the stuff he did, the miracles he did before he did them, and Jesus just walked them out. And the reason I'm going there is because there were some precepts that I used, like my spiritual warfare journal that I talk about. There are some precepts that I used that helped me to conquer the panic attack and the depression. But some of this other stuff requires us to seek Jesus in the Spirit, right? There's a new way. Jesus, as we seek solutions, we may go around casting out demons. Oh, we're standing on Mark chapter 16. Jesus says those that believe will cast out demons. And I'm using this as an example. But every once in a while, you might hit a wall, and all the disciples go, why can't we cast this demon out? And then Jesus says, well, this is something new. This is something new. This kind goeth not out, but by prayer and fasting, right? This is why we have to have this spiritual relationship with the biblical Jesus. And when these dominoes are not as high as they're supposed to be, it's really time to seek the Lord. Amen. So that's been one of my troubling dreams that I've had for decades. It keeps coming back to my remembrance, especially when I approximate or come into the environment if something matches that dream. Before we end here, I want to draw your attention to a couple of links I will be including in the show notes. People have been asking me about where to get the Team Jesus shirts and hoodies. Obviously, you've seen some of the pictures on social media. And if you're interested in getting some, our old provider is no longer providing them. So I have a link in the show notes to where you can get the winning Team Jesus t-shirts and hoodies. And what would be awesome? If when you get one, please take a selfie and tag me in it. There's regular t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, women's comfort tees, so check it out. The link's in the show notes. Now, also, I'm going to be including a link in the show notes about a similar teaching that I did. It's on honoring and remembering dreams. Dreams are spiritual. Oftentimes, it's not just bad pizza. And if you apply these principles that I talk about, you'll be able to remember your dreams better. And of course, I'll have links to my social media accounts as well. I want to thank you for being in my life. If this episode has touched you, please share this with your friends and family on social media. Till we meet again, dig deeper and go higher.
Dig deeper, go higher at comraderocks.net.